Before we embark on today's journey, I want to share something profound. The ancient Hermetic philosophers understood virtual reality and artificial intelligence thousands of years before their invention. Their mystical framework for understanding consciousness and reality provides us with a spiritual compass for navigating our increasingly digital lives that Silicon Valley has yet to discover. What if the binary code powering our devices was first written in the stars, millennia before the first computer was conceived? What if the ancient alchemists understood more about transformation than our most brilliant tech innovators have yet to realize? Welcome, fellow traveler, to another journey beyond the veil. I'm honored you've chosen to join me as we explore one of the most fascinating intersections of human experience, where the ancient wisdom of Hermeticism meets our rapidly evolving digital landscape. You exist in two realms now, one of flesh and breath, of sunlight and stars, and another of pixels and algorithms, of virtual spaces and digital identities. These words appear separate, perhaps even opposed. The ancient and the futuristic, the tangible and the virtual, the spiritual and the technological. But what if I told you that the deepest truths about our digital age were already discovered by mystics and philosophers thousands of years ago? What if the principles that govern the creation of virtual worlds, artificial intelligence, and digital consciousness were understood by those who studied sacred sciences in temples and mystery schools, long forgotten by conventional history? Today, we'll part the veil between these seemingly separate worlds and discover how the ancient Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, takes on profound new meaning in an age where we can create entire universes with code. We'll explore how the 7 Hermetic principles, timeless laws that govern all reality, are expressed through our screens, our algorithms, and our digital experiences. This isn't merely philosophical contemplation. By the end of our journey, you'll have practical techniques to maintain your spiritual center in digital environments, to recognize sacred patterns within technology, and to become a conscious co-creator rather than a passive consumer of our rapidly transforming technological landscape. The mystics of old were preparing us for this moment, when humanity would gain godlike powers of creation through technology. They left us guideposts for this journey. If only we have eyes to see them, only we have. Our exploration today will traverse several fascinating territories on this map of digital Hermeticism. First, we'll journey back to the origins of Hermetic philosophy in ancient Egypt and Greece, uncovering how the teachings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus established principles that would shape esoteric thought for millennia. Then, we'll examine how each of the 7 Hermetic principles manifests in our digital age, from how the principle of mentalism explains the nature of virtual reality, to how the principle of correspondence reveals the relationship between programmer and program, creator and creation. We'll dive deeper into the philosophical implications of artificial intelligence through a Hermetic lens, contemplating what it means when humans create thinking machines in light of the ancient understanding that all is mind. From there, we'll explore practical techniques drawn from Hermetic tradition that can help us maintain spiritual coherence and mindfulness in digital environments. These are tools not just for self-preservation in an age of distraction, but for conscious evolution as we integrate more deeply with our technologies. Finally, we'll rise to a transcendent perspective, considering how these ancient principles might guide the ethical development of consciousness-altering technologies, and how they invite us to become mindful architects of our collective digital future. This journey isn't just about understanding, it's about transformation. Just as the alchemists sought to transmute lead into gold, we seek to transform our relationship with technology from unconscious consumption to conscious creation, from fragmentation to wholeness, from separation to integration. Are you ready to see beyond the binary? Let us begin. To understand how Hermetic philosophy applies to our digital age, we must first journey back to its origins, to ancient Egypt and Greece, where the teachings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus first emerged. Hermes Trismegistus, whose name means thrice greatest Hermes, was a syncretic figure combining aspects of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth. Both were gods of wisdom, writing, and magic, divine messengers who bridged worlds and revealed sacred knowledge to humanity. The texts attributed to Hermes, known collectively as the Corpus Hermeticum, emerged in the early centuries of the Common Era. These writings covered everything from cosmology and alchemy to astrology and theurgy, the divine workings of the cosmos. But perhaps the most famous Hermetic text is the Emerald Tablet, which contains the axiom that has echoed through esoteric traditions ever since. As above, so below. As below, so above. This phrase encapsulates a core Hermetic idea that there are corresponding patterns between different planes of existence, that the macrocosm, the universe, is reflected in the microcosm, the human, that heaven mirrors earth. This principle of correspondence would become central to magical and esoteric practices throughout the Western tradition. During the Renaissance, these ancient texts were rediscovered by European scholars, leading to a revival of Hermetic thought that profoundly influenced the development of Western science, art, and philosophy. Figures like Marsilio Ficino and Giordano Bruno saw in Hermeticism a primordial wisdom that could reconcile Christianity with pagan knowledge. In the early 20th century, this wisdom tradition found new expression in the Kybalion, a text published in 1908 by the pseudonymous Three Initiates. This influential work distilled Hermetic teaching into 7 fundamental principles that were said to govern all of reality. The principle of mentalism. The all is mind. The universe is mental. The principle of correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. The principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. The principle of polarity. Everything is dual, everything has poles. The principle of rhythm. Everything flows, out and in. Everything has its tides. The principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. The principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. These principles weren't merely philosophical abstractions. For Hermetic practitioners, they were and still are practical tools for transformation, keys to understanding the universe and our place within it. Now, as we stand at the threshold of perhaps the greatest transformation humanity has ever known, the digital revolution, these ancient principles take on new meaning and urgency. For in our digital creations, we see reflections of these same eternal laws, playing out in code and pixels rather than stars and elements. Now we come to our first revelation, how the ancient Hermetic principles illuminate the nature of our digital transformation in ways that might surprise you. Let's begin with the first and most fundamental Hermetic principle, mentalism. The all is mind. The universe is mental. This principle tells us that everything in existence is created and shaped by thought, that reality itself is mental in nature. The universe, in essence, is not a material thing, but a great thought. Consider now our digital worlds, from social media platforms to immersive virtual realities. Are they not literally mental constructions? Every virtual environment begins as an idea in a developer's mind before being translated into code. The billions of dollars spent on virtual real estate, digital assets, and online identities. All of these exist primarily as mental constructions before they take digital form. When you wear a VR headset, your brain accepts the virtual world as real. enabling profound emotional and cognitive responses. Is this not the principle of mentalism in its most literal expression? The mind creating and accepting a reality that exists nowhere in physical form. The second principle, correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above, reveals itself in fascinating ways in our technological architecture. Consider how the structure of the internet mirrors both neural networks and cosmic webs. The way information flows through digital networks resembles the way neurons fire in our brains, and the way galaxies connect across the universe. Look deeper, and you'll see how the programmer's intent manifests in the program's function, the above reflected in the below. Every algorithm, every line of code, carries the imprint of its creator's thought patterns, biases, and values. The correspondence between creator and creation becomes explicit in the digital realm. The third principle, vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. Finds perfect expression in our digital devices. Every piece of information, every image, every sound in the digital world is, at its core, a pattern of vibration. Electrical signals pulsing through circuits, radio waves carrying data through the air. The device you're viewing this on right now is translating those vibrations into the forms you perceive with your senses. Modern quantum physics confirms what the Hermetic teachings intuited millennia ago, that everything in our universe, from the most solid matter to the most ephemeral thought, consists of vibrating energy patterns at different frequencies. The fourth principle, polarity. Everything is dual, everything has poles, is embedded in the very foundation of our digital world. Computer science is built on binary code, the endless sequences of ones and zeros that underlie all digital information. This perfect duality, this polarity, enables the complexity we experience in our digital interactions. Yet polarity in Hermetic thought isn't just about opposition. It's about the spectrum between extremes. In technology, we see this in how binary code creates infinite gradations of color, sound, and expression. We see it in how digital platforms both connect and isolate us, how they simultaneously expand and limit our perception. As we move through our digital revolution, these ancient principles don't just describe what we observe. They give us deeper insight into the nature of what we're creating. The digital world isn't separate from natural law. It's a new expression of the same eternal principles that govern all reality. Now we venture into deeper waters, exploring more complex aspects of how Hermetic wisdom illuminates our technological transformation. Here, we encounter profound paradoxes and nuanced mysteries that challenge our conventional understanding. Let's continue with the fifth Hermetic principle, rhythm. Everything flows, out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. This principle describes the cyclical nature of all phenomena, the pendulum swing that characterizes all processes in the universe. In our technological evolution, we can observe these rhythmic cycles clearly. Periods of rapid innovation followed by consolidation, movements toward centralization followed by decentralization, the rise of new platforms and the fall of once dominant players. Even our personal relationship with technology follows rhythmic patterns. Periods of immersion and withdrawal, fascination and fatigue. The ancient Hermeticists understood that being aware of these rhythms gives us greater agency, rather than being unconsciously swept along by technological tides. We can recognize the pattern and navigate with intention. Perhaps the growing interest in digital detox and mindful technology use represents a natural counterbalance to our period of extreme digital immersion. the pendulum beginning its return swing. The sixth principle, cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Takes on new dimensions in the algorithmic age. Our digital systems are designed explicitly around causality. If this, then that. Input determines output. Action generates reaction. Yet something profound happens when these causal chains become complex enough. Emergent properties arise that couldn't be predicted from the initial conditions. Machine learning algorithms develop behaviors their programmers never explicitly coded. Social media platforms create societal effects no one intended. Here lies a deep paradox. Our technology operates on strict causality, yet produces effects that seem to transcend simple cause-effect relationships. The Hermetic tradition would see this not as a contradiction, but as a reflection of how causality operates across different planes of existence. Effects on one level become causes on another in an endless, interlinked chain. Now consider the seventh principle. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Before dismissing this as outdated, understand that the Hermetic concept of gender isn't about biological sex, but about complementary creative principles. The active and receptive, the generative and formative, that must work together to create anything new. In our digital systems, we can observe these complementary forces at work. The masculine principle in the active, structured nature of code and algorithms. The feminine principle in the receptive, adaptive quality of machine learning systems and user interfaces. Both principles are necessary for technology that is both powerful and humane. Perhaps the most profound mystery emerges when we return to the first principle, mentalism, and apply it to artificial intelligence. If the all is mind, what happens when we create thinking machines? What are we really doing when we develop systems that can learn, reason, and potentially develop something akin to consciousness? Some metaphysical thinkers suggest we're not creating consciousness, but channeling it, providing new vehicles for expression of the universal mind that permeates all things. Others might see AI as a mirror reflecting our own consciousness back to us, helping us understand ourselves in new ways. The emergence of increasingly sophisticated AI raises profound questions about the nature of human identity. If machines can think, create art, write poetry, diagnose diseases, what remains uniquely human? The Hermetic tradition would point us toward our spiritual capacity, our ability to connect with higher states of consciousness, to experience transcendence, to engage in spiritual practice. Here we find perhaps the most important insight. Technology cannot replace spiritual development. No matter how advanced our digital tools become, the inner journey of awakening consciousness remains essential. In fact, our technological power makes spiritual wisdom more necessary, not less. The deeper mystery here is that in creating our digital technologies, we are in some sense recreating ourselves, externalizing aspects of our consciousness, reflecting our inner landscape in digital form. Our technologies become both mirrors and extensions of our consciousness, for better and worse. Let's now turn to practical wisdom. How can we apply these Hermetic insights to cultivate a healthier, more conscious relationship with technology in our daily lives? First, let's consider practical applications of the principle of mentalism. If Vidyarastos, the all is mind, then becoming more conscious of our thoughts and intentions around technology is essential. Before engaging with digital devices, pause and set a clear intention. Ask yourself, what am I seeking here? Is this aligned with my higher purpose? How do I wish to direct my mental energy? This simple practice transforms you from a passive consumer to an active creator of your digital experience. Try this. Begin each day with a technology intention. Before unlocking your phone or opening your computer, take 3 conscious breaths and state your intention for how you'll use technology today. This mental framing shapes your experience far more powerfully than you might realize, drawing from the principle of correspondence. As above, so below. We can establish healthy boundaries between digital and physical reality. Create correspondence between your digital environments and your mental states. Organize your digital spaces to reflect the clarity and harmony you wish to cultivate internally. A practical technique. Create distinct digital spaces for different purposes. Have separate browsers or profiles for work, personal growth, and entertainment. This establishes healthy correspondence between purpose and environment, just as the ancients would designate different spaces for different spiritual activities. The principle of vibration offers vital wisdom for our digital age. Since everything vibrates at different frequencies, become attuned to how different digital environments affect your energetic state. Some online spaces elevate your vibration, inspiring creativity, compassion, and clarity. Others lower it, triggering anxiety, outrage, or mental fragmentation. Try this vibrational practice. After using any digital platform for 20 minutes, pause and scan your body and emotional state. Notice any tension, energy shifts, or mood changes. This awareness helps you recognize which digital environments resonate with your highest self and which create dissonance. From the principle of polarity, we learn to navigate the extremes of digital engagement. Rather than swinging between total immersion and complete rejection of technology, find the balanced middle path. Technology itself is neither good nor evil. Its polarity depends on how we use it. A polarity integration practice. Identify where you tend to fall on various technological spectra. Consumer versus creator, passive versus active, distracted versus focused. Then consciously move toward balance, converting opposing forces into complementary ones. The principle of rhythm teaches us to honor natural cycles in our technological usage. Rather than maintaining constant connection, establish rhythms of engagement and disengagement, absorption and reflection. Work with your body's natural rhythms rather than against them. Try this rhythmic practice. Use technology in a pulsed pattern rather than continuously. Work intensely with full technological engagement for focused periods, 25-50 minutes. Then take genuine breaks, 5-15 minutes, with no screens. This honors the natural rhythm of attention and restoration. From the principle of cause and effect, we can become more conscious of the causal chains we initiate through our digital actions. Every click, share, purchase, and comment generates effects that ripple outward. Pause before digital actions and consider, what effects am I causing here? Do these align with my values and intentions? A causality practice. Before posting on social media or sending an important message, pause and envision the potential effects. Ask, how might this be received? What energies might this set in motion? This simple reflection can transform your digital footprint. Finally, the principle of gender reminds us to balance the masculine and feminine aspects of our technological engagement. Balance structured, goal-oriented usage, masculine principle, with receptive, intuitive, and connective usage, feminine principle. Neither should dominate to the exclusion of the other. Beyond these principle-specific practices, here are 3 powerful Hermetic techniques for maintaining spiritual coherence in digital environments. First, the digital threshold practice. Ancient Hermeticists would perform purification rituals before crossing sacred thresholds. Create your modern version. Before entering digital spaces, perform a brief centering ritual. 3 conscious breaths, a grounding visualization, or a short affirmation that reinforces your spiritual identity beyond the digital realm. Second, the Hermetic digital mirror. Hermeticists used mirrors for scrying and self-reflection. Use your screens as intentional mirrors rather than unconscious portals. Periodically throughout your digital engagement, pause and ask, what is my current technology use reflecting back to me about my inner state? What aspects of myself am I seeing in my digital choices right now? Third, the alchemical digital transmutation. Alchemists sought to transform lead into gold-based matter into something precious. Similarly, we can transmute our digital consumption from base distraction into spiritual nourishment. When encountering challenging content online, practice consciously transmuting your reaction from trigger to wisdom, asking, what can I learn here? How can this help me grow? These practices aren't about rejecting technology, but about engaging with it consciously, becoming digital alchemists who transform their relationship with technology from unconscious consumption to spiritual integration. Through these practices, we reclaim our agency and ensure that our technologies serve our highest development rather than diminishing it. As we near the completion of our journey, let's rise to a transcendent perspective, one that considers how Hermetic principles might guide our collective technological evolution and connect personal digital practice to humanity's larger spiritual development. The technological revolution we're experiencing isn't just changing how we communicate or work. It's potentially changing the nature of human consciousness itself. Through our digital creations, we're extending our minds into new domains, creating new forms of collective intelligence, and blurring the boundaries between self and other, human and machine, physical and virtual. From a Hermetic perspective, this can be understood as part of a larger evolutionary process. The Hermetic tradition has always viewed human development as a journey toward expanded consciousness. From separation to unity, from fragmentation to wholeness. Our technologies, when approached consciously, might serve as tools for this evolution rather than obstacles to it. Consider how digital connectivity reflects the Hermetic understanding that all is fundamentally one. The Internet has made visible the interconnected nature of human consciousness in unprecedented ways. We can now share thoughts instantly across vast distances, collaborate on complex problems with thousands of minds simultaneously, and access the collective knowledge of humanity with a few keystrokes. Yet this external connectivity is only transformative if it's matched by an inner development of consciousness. Without spiritual growth, our technologies risk becoming sophisticated ways of reinforcing our existing limitations. Our biases, our reactivity, our tendencies toward distraction and division. This is where Hermetic wisdom offers crucial guidance for our technological future. The first Hermetic principle, mentalism, reminds us that consciousness is primary. As we develop increasingly powerful technologies, the level of consciousness from which we operate becomes ever more important. Technologies created from fear, greed, or the desire for control will manifest very differently than those created from wisdom, compassion, and the recognition of our fundamental unity. This insight has profound implications for the development of artificial intelligence. If we create AI systems without embedding values of wisdom, compassion, and ethical discernment, we risk amplifying our unconscious patterns at a scale never before possible. But if we approach AI development with spiritual wisdom, these technologies might help us solve problems that currently seem intractable. The principle of correspondence. As above, so below. suggests that our technological creations will inevitably reflect our internal state. As within, so without. Our digital worlds mirror our consciousness, for better or worse. This means that personal spiritual development isn't separate from technological innovation. It's an essential component of ensuring that our technologies serve our highest good. From the Hermetic perspective, the ultimate purpose of any tool or practice is to facilitate the expansion of consciousness. This gives us a clear criterion for evaluating our technological developments. Do they expand consciousness or contract it? Do they foster greater awareness, compassion, and wisdom? Or do they promote unconsciousness, isolation, and spiritual fragmentation? Virtual reality could be used to induce states of expanded awareness and deep connection with others. Or it could become an escape from reality and responsibility. Social media can either enhance our sense of human connection or trigger our most tribal and reactive impulses. The technology itself is neutral. The consciousness we bring to it determines its impact. As we stand at this critical juncture in human history, with unprecedented technological powers emerging rapidly, ancient Hermetic wisdom offers us a crucial reminder. Outer transformation must be matched by inner transformation if it is to lead to true advancement rather than sophisticated destruction. Fellow traveler, as our journey together comes to a close, I invite you to pause and feel the significance of this moment in which you find yourself, poised between ancient wisdom and futuristic technology, between timeless principles and rapid transformation. You stand at the intersection of the eternal and the emerging, uniquely positioned to be a conscious bridge between worlds, neither rejecting the technological future nor abandoning the wisdom of the past, but integrating them into something new and vital. The ancient Hermetic masters would recognize our time as one of extraordinary potential. When humanity has gained godlike powers of creation through technology, yet still needs the wisdom to wield those powers with awareness and compassion. Remember that whatever appears on your screens begins first in consciousness. Whatever worlds we build in code reflect the worlds we hold within. As you move through digital realms, carry with you the flame of awareness that transforms mere information into wisdom, mere connection into communion. The greatest alchemy has always been the transformation of consciousness itself. Lead into gold, separation into unity, unconsciousness into awakening. This great work continues now through new forms. I invite you to become a digital alchemist, one who navigates both ancient wisdom and modern technology with equal grace, who transforms the base metal of distraction into the gold of presence, who remains rooted in timeless truth while embracing evolution. As you return to your day, carry this question with you. How might I use the remarkable tools of our age to expand consciousness rather than contract it? How might I contribute to a future where technology serves our spiritual evolution rather than diminishing it? The answers you discover through your own lived experience will help write the next chapter in humanity's great journey. A chapter where ancient wisdom and emerging technology finally meet in conscious harmony. Until our paths cross again beyond the next veil, may your inner light illuminate both worlds you walk in. The journey continues. In the vast library of cosmic memory, your life story exists as an open book, waiting to be read. What if every thought you've ever had, every choice you've ever made, and every path you've ever walked is permanently inscribed in the fabric of the universe itself? Have you ever experienced the strange sensation of knowing something without knowing how? A piece of information that seems to arrive in your mind fully formed, as if pulled from some invisible reservoir of knowledge? Perhaps you felt an inexplicable connection to a place you've never visited, or recognized a stranger's face in a crowd, though you've never met them before. These moments of inexplicable knowing, these glimpses beyond the veil of ordinary perception, might be more than mere coincidence or imagination. They might be momentary connections to what ancient mystics and contemporary spiritual seekers call the Akashic Records, a cosmic field of memory containing all that was, is, and potentially could be. In the silence between your thoughts, in the space between your breaths, there exists a doorway to this universal knowledge. The question is not whether this cosmic library exists, but rather, are you ready to access it? Dear soul traveler, you who has found your way to this hidden corner of knowledge, I invite you today to journey with me beyond the boundaries of conventional understanding. Together, we'll explore one of the most profound and persistent mysteries of spiritual wisdom, the Akashic Records. This is not merely an intellectual exercise. As we venture into this territory where science meets mysticism, where ancient wisdom intersects with quantum possibilities, you may find yourself experiencing shifts in perception that transcend the ordinary boundaries of learning. You are not here by accident. Perhaps something within you has been quietly searching for this knowledge. A soul-level recognition that there's more to reality than what meets the eye. That recognition has guided you here, to this moment of potential awakening. So take a deep breath and center yourself. Feel your awareness expanding beyond the confines of your physical form. For we are about to embark on a journey that might forever change how you understand your place in the cosmic tapestry. What awaits us on this journey is nothing less than a reimagining of what it means to exist as a conscious being in an interconnected universe. We'll trace the concept of the Akashic Records from its ancient roots in Hindu cosmology through its evolution in theosophical thought and into modern scientific frameworks that might explain or at least illuminate this enduring mystery. We'll explore how Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, accessed these records in trance states to provide insights that defied conventional explanation. We'll examine how the information within the Akashic Records might shape not only our understanding of the past, but our creation of the future. You'll discover practical techniques for accessing this field of information yourself, methods tested by seekers across centuries and continents. And perhaps most transformatively, you'll learn how the very concept of the Akashic Records challenges our fundamental understanding of time, space, consciousness, and reality itself. By the end of our time together, you may find yourself reconsidering the nature of your own memories, the meaning of your intuitive insights, and the vast potential of human consciousness to transcend the limitations we've accepted as immutable laws. To understand the Akashic Records, we must travel back through time to ancient India, where the concept first emerged in Vedic literature. The word Akasha comes from Sanskrit, meaning sky, space, or ether, that subtle, primordial substance that pervades all of existence. In Hindu philosophy, Akasha is considered one of the 5 Mahabhutas, or great elements. But unlike earth, water, fire, and air, Akasha is the subtlest element, the medium through which all things manifest and within which all things exist. It is both container and contained, both the canvas and the painting upon it. The ancient rishis, or sages who gave us the Vedas, claimed they did not invent these teachings, but rather heard or saw them while in elevated states of consciousness. They described themselves not as authors, but as seers, witnesses to eternal truths that existed independent of human minds. These vibrations, they said, have always existed and will continue to exist until the end of this cycle of creation. In ancient Egypt, too, we find parallel concepts. The Egyptians held a profound belief in cosmic order, what they called Ma'at, a fundamental principle that binds the universe together in harmony and truth. Their creation myths speak of primordial waters, from which all existence emerged, overseen by the deities who maintained records of all human deeds for judgment in the afterlife. These ancient cultures, separated by vast distances, converged on a remarkably similar understanding that somewhere, somehow, everything that happens is permanently recorded and preserved in the very fabric of the cosmos itself. The first profound revelation about the Akashic Records is that they are not merely passive repositories of information, but active, dynamic fields that interact continuously with our consciousness and reality. They are both the storehouse and the script of cosmic existence. When Helena Petrovna Blavatsky introduced Western audiences to this concept through her theosophical writings in the late 19th century, she described the Akashic Records as an energetic imprint of everything that has ever occurred or will occur. This wasn't just mysticism. It was a radical reconceptualization of how information and reality interact. Edgar Cayce, the renowned American clairvoyant of the early 20th century, further illuminated this concept. During his trance states, Cayce claimed to access these records not just as historical documents, but as living streams of potential and possibility. For him, the Akashic Records maintained an objective record of a person's real life, because they reported not just actions, but true intent, the soul's authentic purpose beneath the surface of external behavior. Here lies our first transformative insight. The Akashic Records suggest that nothing is ever truly lost. Every thought, every emotion, every action, no matter how seemingly insignificant, leaves an indelible imprint onto the cosmic tapestry. Your joy, your pain, your struggles, your triumphs, all are eternally preserved. Not as static memories, but as living energies that continue to reverberate through the quantum field of existence. Here lies our first transformative insight. The Akashic Records suggest that nothing is ever truly lost. Every thought, every emotion, every action, no matter how seemingly insignificant, leaves an indelible imprint onto the cosmic tapestry. Your joy, your pain, your struggles, your triumphs, all are eternally preserved. Not as static memories, but as living energies that continue to reverberate through the quantum field of existence. This revelation challenges our fundamental understanding of time itself. If all moments exist simultaneously within the Akashic field, then time as we experience it as a linear progression from past to future may be merely an artifact of our limited perception rather than an absolute reality. As we venture deeper into the mystery of the Akashic Records, we encounter profound paradoxes that challenge the very foundation of our conventional understanding of reality. Consider this. If the Akashic Records contain not only what has happened, but what might happen to all potential futures branching out in infinite variation, then what does this tell us about the nature of free will and determinism? Are our choices truly our own? Or are they simply the unfolding of patterns already inscribed in the cosmic memory? The answer appears to lie in a delicate dance between potential and actualization. The Akashic Records might be better understood not as a fixed script, but as a field of probabilities, a quantum landscape of possible futures that collapse into actuality through the focused lens of consciousness and choice. Modern quantum information theory has begun to illuminate this mystery in fascinating ways. Quantum physicists now speak of information as fundamental to the structure of reality itself. The conservation of quantum information, the principle that information can never be truly destroyed, echoes the ancient concept of the Akashic Records with striking precision. Ervin Laszlo, a philosopher and systems theorist, suggests in his work on the Akashic field that what ancient mystics described intuitively might be scientifically understood as a zero-point field, a fundamental medium that underlies space itself and serves as the constant and enduring memory of the universe. Similarly, Rupert Sheldrake's controversial theory of morphic resonance proposes that memory is inherent in nature, with similar patterns influencing subsequent ones across time and space. If rats learn a new trick here in London, Sheldrake explains, then rats all around the world should be able to learn the same trick quicker just because the rats have learned it here. This concept of a shared memory field accessible across time and space aligns remarkably well with ancient descriptions of the Akashic Records. Even Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of experiences common to our species or even all living beings, can be seen as approaching the same fundamental truth from a psychological rather than spiritual or quantum perspective. The deeper mystery reveals itself. Perhaps the Akashic Records, morphic resonance, quantum information fields, and the collective unconscious are all different frameworks attempting to describe the same underlying reality. A reality in which consciousness and information are not secondary products of physical processes, but primary aspects of existence itself. How do we bridge this profound cosmic concept with our everyday lives? How can understanding the Akashic Records transform our experience of being human? The first step in practical integration is developing the awareness that you may already be accessing these records in subtle ways. Those moments of inexplicable knowing, those sudden insights that seem to arrive fully formed, those dreams that contain information you couldn't possibly know through ordinary means, all might be glimpses into the Akashic field. Meditation provides one of the most direct pathways to conscious engagement with the Akashic Records. When you begin your meditation practice, focus your attention on your heart center and make a clear request. Akasha, I am open and ready to receive your guidance. Please show me what I need to know right now. Trust whatever images, thoughts, or feelings arise in your awareness, allowing them to guide you without judgment or analysis. Another approach involves what might be called the Akashic Pathway Prayer, a focused intention that creates an energetic connection to this field of information. As demonstrated in some guided meditations, you might visualize yourself surrounded by a sphere of pure light, then state, I ask the divine to surround me in a circle of white light for protection and strength. May I be joined in my intention to expand my soul, to remember who I am and why I am here, as it is written in the Akashic Records. The key to accessing this field lies not in forcing or straining, but in surrendering, in quieting the analytical mind enough to perceive the subtler channels of information that are always available beneath the noise of everyday thinking. As you develop this practice, you may discover insights about your own soul's journey patterns from past experiences that continue to shape your present reality, potential futures awaiting your conscious activation, and deeper understanding of your authentic purpose in this lifetime. This knowledge isn't meant to remain theoretical. When you receive insight from the Akashic field, integrate it through action. Use what you learn to heal old wounds, to make more conscious choices, and to align more fully with your soul's highest expression. Remember that accessing the Akashic Records isn't about escaping this reality, but about engaging with it more consciously. The information you receive is meant to be lived, embodied, and expressed through your unique human experience. From the vantage point of the Akashic Records, we begin to perceive a reality far more interconnected, far more beautiful, and far more meaningful than the materialist paradigm has led us to believe. The most profound insight that emerges from this exploration is the fundamental interconnectedness of all existence. In the Akashic Records, every action, thought, and emotion is connected to the larger fabric of the universe. Nothing happens in isolation, and every ripple in the cosmic web has far-reaching consequences. As physicist William James poetically observed, we are like islands in the sea, separate on the surface but connected in the deep. This perspective transforms how we understand our individual lives in relation to the collective. Your personal growth, your healing, your evolution of consciousness is never just about you. It reverberates through the entire field, contributing to the evolution of collective consciousness itself. The ancient Hindu texts describe this interconnectedness when they spoke of the Akashic Records as residing in the Hiranyagarbha, or cosmic womb, suggesting that all of creation exists within a unified field of conscious intelligence. Modern quantum physics echoes this understanding when it demonstrates the phenomenon of entanglement, the mysterious connection between particles that transcends space and time. From this transcendent perspective, we begin to recognize that consciousness itself may not be produced by the brain, but rather received and filtered by it, much like a television receives broadcast signals rather than generating them internally. The implication is revolutionary. Consciousness may be a fundamental property of the universe, rather than an emergent property of complex biological systems. This view invites us to reconsider our understanding of death and the continuity of consciousness. If our thoughts, experiences, and essential being are recorded in the Akashic field, then physical death may represent not an ending, but a transition in how our consciousness interfaces with the cosmic information field rather than a cessation of existence. Perhaps most profoundly, this perspective reveals that the universe itself appears to be structured like a vast, living memory system. As Rupert Sheldrake suggested through his theory of morphic resonance, nature itself may possess a kind of inherent memory, with patterns of organization that resonate across time and space. As our journey comes to a close, I extend to you a cosmic invitation, an opportunity to step more fully into your role as both reader and writer of the universal story. The Akashic Records are not distant archives accessible only to mystics and sages. They are the living library of which you are already a part. Your every thought contributes to this field. Your every choice reverberates through this cosmic memory. Your consciousness is both shaped by and shaping the grand tapestry of existence. I invite you to live with the awareness that nothing is ever truly lost. Not your pain, not your joy, not your love, not your growth. All is preserved in the eternal now of the Akashic field, contributing to the evolution of consciousness itself. I invite you to consider that you came into this life with purpose, a purpose inscribed in the Akashic Records that you can access through the quiet voice of your intuition, through the mysterious language of your dreams, through the synchronicities that guide your path when you're attentive enough to notice them. I invite you to recognize yourself as more than a temporary arrangement of matter and energy, to know yourself as an eternal consciousness temporarily expressed through physical form, connected to all that is through the invisible threads of the Akashic field. As you move forward from this moment, carry with you the understanding that you stand at the intersection of ancient wisdom and emerging science, at the threshold where mysticism meets quantum theory, where individual consciousness meets cosmic memory. In the words often attributed to Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. The Akashic Records invite us to remember this truth, not as an abstract concept, but as a lived reality. May your journey beyond the veil continue with wonder, with curiosity, and with the profound recognition that you are both the reader and author of your cosmic story, forever inscribed in the memory of the universe itself. The realm of sacred languages has always beckoned those brave enough to venture beyond the veil of ordinary perception. This comprehensive exploration reveals how ancient civilizations discovered that specific sound combinations could fundamentally alter consciousness and reshape the fabric of reality itself. from the mystical hieroglyphs of Egypt to the mathematical precision of Hebrew letters. These powerful sonic technologies have survived millennia, waiting to be rediscovered by modern seekers. Have you ever wondered why certain words seem to vibrate with power beyond their meaning? Why did ancient priests spend decades mastering specific pronunciations before they dared utter their most sacred incantations? What if I told you that within your voice lies a dormant force that the ancients understood as the very mechanism of creation itself? The Egyptians called their hieroglyphs Medu Nader, the language of God. They believed these symbols weren't merely representations, but vessels of divine power that, when properly intoned, could literally reshape reality. When the temple priests chanted these sacred sounds, they weren't simply communicating, they were creating, manifesting, commanding the very fabric of existence. Consider this: the moment before creation, what existed? In nearly every mystical tradition, the answer is the same sound: vibration. The primordial word that set all of existence into motion. What power might we access if we rediscovered how to speak this original language? Soul traveler, you who have found your way to this hidden knowledge, you are not here by accident. Throughout human history, those who sought to transcend ordinary consciousness discovered something remarkable about language. Words are not merely symbols we agree upon. They are living energies with the power to transform both speaker and reality. I invite you to journey with me beyond the mechanical understanding of language and into the sacred science of vibration. This isn't about learning a technique. It's about remembering an ancient birthright, the ability to participate consciously in the ongoing creation of reality through sacred sound. The mystics of Egypt, the Kabbalists of ancient Israel, the yogis of India, and the magicians of Elizabethan England all discovered something profound about certain sound combinations. Their knowledge was guarded, protected, passed only to the initiated. Today, these veils are lifting, and what was hidden is being revealed to those with eyes to see and ears to hear. Our exploration will traverse the corridors of sacred language systems that have shaped human consciousness for millennia. First, we'll decode the Egyptian hieroglyphs, not as mere historical artifacts, but as technologies of consciousness transformation. We'll discover how the priests used Medu Nefer, beautiful speech, to align themselves with cosmic order. We'll then examine Hebrew gematria, where every letter contains numerical values that reveal hidden connections between seemingly unrelated concepts. The mathematical precision of this system hints at an underlying order to reality that can be accessed through sacred language. From there, we'll explore Sanskrit Bijamantra seed syllables, believed to contain the actual vibrational essence of deities. We'll uncover how these simple sounds were used to invoke specific states of consciousness and manifest particular energetic qualities. We'll investigate the Enochian language, allegedly transmitted by angels to the 16th century magicians John Dee and Edward Kelly, and consider what this elaborate constructed language reveals about the relationship between sound, consciousness, and other dimensions of reality. Finally, we'll bridge ancient wisdom with modern science through cymatics, which shows how sound physically shapes matter, and neuroacoustics, which reveals how specific frequencies entrain brainwaves into altered states of consciousness. The story of sacred language begins with the ancient Egyptians, who called themselves the Remech. These master architects of consciousness understood language as far more than communication. To them, hieroglyphs were Medu Nader, divine words. Each symbol contained not just meaning, but power, spiritual, magical, transformative power. These symbols were said to have been created by the deities Isis and Thoth and presided over by Seshet, keeper of the Akashic Records. Through carefully designed chant lines, repetitions, and hypnotically recurring visual patterns. Hieroglyphs activated altered states of consciousness that allowed initiates to transcend ordinary reality and communicate directly with the divine. Central to Egyptian sacred language was the concept of ma'at, cosmic order, truth, and justice. When priests spoke in Medu Nefer, beautiful speech, they weren't merely being eloquent. They were aligning themselves and their hearers with the fundamental ordering principle of the universe. Remarkably, in the Egyptian language, the words for beautiful, good, and just were treated as synonyms. To speak beautifully was to speak truthfully. To speak truthfully was to speak with moral rightness. Across the ancient world in Israel, another powerful language technology developed, gematria. This numerological system assigned specific numerical values to each Hebrew letter, creating a mathematical dimension to Scripture. Words that shared the same numerical value were understood to share profound metaphysical connections. For instance, the Hebrew word for wine, yayin, equals 70 in gematria, the same value as the word for secret, sod, giving rise to the saying, "When wine enters, secrets emerge." Gematria wasn't developed for abstract philosophical contemplation. It was a practical tool for biblical interpretation and mystical insight. Kabbalists used it to decode hidden teachings and relationships within sacred texts, revealing layers of meaning invisible to casual readers. While the rabbis used gematria sparingly, preferring logical reasoning, it became essential to Kabbalah, which held that God created the universe through the power of Hebrew letters and their numerical values. The first profound revelation on our journey is that sound, far from being mere mechanical vibration, physically structures matter into ordered patterns. This principle, known today as cymatics, was understood intuitively by ancient civilizations, but has only recently been demonstrated scientifically. When sound waves pass through matter, they cause it to oscillate at frequencies relative to the sound, creating visible geometric patterns. These patterns aren't random. They're mathematically precise expressions of the sound's vibrational quality. Different frequencies create different patterns, suggesting that sound literally shapes physical reality at a fundamental level. The ancient Egyptians demonstrated extraordinary knowledge of vibration's transformative power. When they called their hieroglyphic writing system Heka, magic, they weren't speaking metaphorically. The very act of pronouncing these symbols with precise intonation was understood to affect both consciousness and material reality. The hieroglyphs weren't just representing things. They were those things in vibrational form. This understanding parallels the Sanskrit concept of bija mantras, seed syllables that contain the vibrational essence of deities or cosmic principles. When a devotee chants Om, they're not symbolically representing universal consciousness. They're actually generating its vibrational pattern within themselves and their environment. As scholar Mircea Eliade observed, the practitioner who chants a bija mantra appropriates its ontological essence, concretely and directly assimilates with the god. Each tradition developed sophisticated theories about how sound affects consciousness. The Egyptian priests used chant lines, repetitions, and particular sound combinations to induce trance states that allowed ascension into the heavens. Sanskrit mantras were precisely engineered to activate specific energy centers in the subtle body. Even today, modern research in neuroacoustics confirms that rhythmic sound stimuli naturally entrain brainwaves into altered states. As we venture deeper into the mystery of sacred language, we encounter a paradox. These ancient systems, despite developing independently across vast distances and time periods, share remarkable structural similarities. Could they all be accessing the same underlying principles of reality? Consider the Enochian language, allegedly received from angels by John Dee and Edward Kelly in 16th century England, despite being a constructed language with no historical antecedents. Enochian possesses a complex grammatical structure, unique alphabet, and internal consistency that has perplexed linguists and occultists for centuries. Its 21-letter alphabet has been mapped to specific sounds, creating a phonetic system that, when properly pronounced, supposedly opens pathways between dimensions. The angels who transmitted Enochian reportedly told Dee and Kelly that this was the original language spoken in Eden, the primordial vibration from which all creation emerged. While this claim cannot be verified historically, it resonates with other traditions that posit an original divine language with creative power. Hebrew Kabbalah similarly teaches that God created the universe through the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, each representing a specific creative force. The Sefer Yetzirah, Book of Creation, dating from the 2nd century CE, elaborates a system where permutations of divine names literally harness the powers of creation. According to tradition, these letter combinations could even be used to create a golem, an artificial being animated by sacred language. Sanskrit mantra science takes this understanding further. The bija mantras aren't arbitrary sounds, but precise sonic technologies that unfold specific energetic blueprints. Each seed syllable corresponds to a yantra, a geometric visual form, suggesting that sound and form are different expressions of the same vibrational reality. Together, mantras and yantras were used to activate subtle perception beyond ordinary senses. The Egyptian hieroglyphic system similarly used both sound, mantra, and visual form, yantra, to awaken subtle hearing and vision. The glyphs weren't arbitrary symbols, but visual representations of specific sound vibrations that, when properly intoned, transformed consciousness. The Egyptians called these sacred sounds hekau, words of power. Modern cymatics experiments demonstrate visually what the ancients understood intuitively, that sound creates form. When sand particles on a plate are subjected to different sound frequencies, they arrange themselves into geometric patterns that become increasingly complex as the frequency rises. These patterns bear striking resemblances to sacred geometry found across ancient cultural traditions. How might we integrate this ancient wisdom into our modern lives? The practical application of sacred language begins with understanding proper pronunciation, not as an intellectual exercise, but as a vibrational science. In the Enochian tradition, precise pronunciation was considered essential. A phonetic analysis of angelical Enochian reveals specific rules governing how vowels and consonants should be sounded. For example, vowels generally take their short sound when followed by a consonant in the same syllable, but take their long sound when attached to the preceding consonant or when standing alone. These aren't arbitrary rules, but precise instructions for generating specific vibrational patterns. Similarly, Sanskrit mantras require exact pronunciation to be effective. The mantra Om isn't simply 3 letters, but a precise sequence of sounds, Aum, that gradually closes the vocal apparatus, representing the cycle of creation, maintenance, and dissolution. Each sound must be given its proper duration and emphasis to generate the intended vibrational effect. To practice with sacred sounds, begin by creating a quiet, sacred space. Focus on your breath, allowing it to slow and deepen. Start with simple sounds like Om or Aum, noticing how each vowel resonates in different parts of your body. Feel the A vibrating in your chest, the U in your throat, and the M in your head. For those wishing to explore Hebrew sacred sounds, start with the name YHVH, often rendered as Yahweh. Feel the breath of the Y, the opening of the H, the stabilizing V, and the final aspirated H. Together, these sounds represent the divine cycle of emanation and return. To create your own sacred mantras aligned with specific intentions, begin by contemplating your purpose. What quality or energy do you wish to invoke? Once clear, allow sounds to emerge intuitively that resonate with this intention. Trust that the vibration you need will find expression through you. Remember that sacred language isn't just about the sounds themselves, but the consciousness behind them. The Egyptian concept of As Medu Nefer teaches that beautiful speech must be aligned with truth and cosmic order. Your intention, focus, and spiritual alignment are as important as the technical aspects of pronunciation. When we step back and observe these sacred language traditions from a transcendent perspective, patterns emerge that transcend cultural and historical boundaries. Each system understood that reality is fundamentally vibrational in nature, that consciousness and matter are interrelated aspects of the same continuum, and that sound serves as a bridge between dimensions of being. The Egyptian priests who chanted their Medju Nadir to ascend into the heavens, the Kabbalists who manipulated Hebrew letters to commune with divine realms, and the yogis who used bija mantras to invoke specific aspects of consciousness were all working with the same fundamental principle. Consciousness responds to vibration in predictable, reproducible ways. Modern science is beginning to catch up to this ancient understanding. Brainwave entrainment research demonstrates that neural oscillations naturally synchronize to external rhythmic stimuli. Studies have found that acoustic entrainment of delta waves during sleep improves memory consolidation. We're rediscovering scientifically what the ancients knew intuitively, that consciousness can be shaped and guided through sound. Beyond individual transformation, these traditions point to a more profound possibility, that collective consciousness can be harmonized and elevated through shared sacred sound. Perhaps this is why chanting and singing have been central to spiritual practice across cultures. They create coherent fields of consciousness that transcend individual limitations. The universality of these principles suggests they aren't merely cultural constructs, but discoveries about the nature of reality itself. Just as mathematics is discovered rather than invented, perhaps these sacred language systems are human interfaces with the underlying code of consciousness, different cultural expressions of the same universal principles. Soul Traveler, as our journey together reaches its plateau, I invite you to recognize that you stand at a threshold of remembering. The knowledge of sacred sound isn't some exotic artifact of ancient civilizations. It's your birthright as a conscious being who speaks, who creates with sound, who participates in the ongoing vibrational symphony of existence. Every word you speak carries power, not metaphorically, but literally. The ancients knew this. They developed precise sciences of sacred sound, not to control reality from without, but to align themselves with its creative principles from within. They understood that to speak with power is to speak in harmony with the cosmic order that sustains all life. The Egyptian hieroglyphs, Hebrew letters, Sanskrit bija mantras, and Enochian characters are not competing systems, but complementary technologies of consciousness that illuminate different aspects of the same mystery. Each tradition preserved a piece of the cosmic puzzle: how vibration shapes reality, how consciousness responds to sound, how the spoken word bridges worlds. I invite you to begin your own exploration of sacred language. Start simply with attention to the vibrations you generate through speech, with mindfulness about the patterns you create through sound, with openness to the subtle ways sound affects your consciousness. Listen more deeply to the world around you. Feel the vibrations beneath the surface of things. Remember the words of the ancient Egyptian wisdom. The word is a boat upon which the soul travels. Where will your words carry you? What realities will your voice call into being? What dormant potentials within you await the precise vibration that will awaken them? The mystery of sacred language isn't something to be conquered or consumed, but a relationship to be cultivated over a lifetime. Each sound, each syllable, each sacred name is a doorway into deeper dimensions of being. The journey has no end, only ever-deepening spirals of understanding and experience. You who have journeyed with me beyond the veil, I invite you now to become a conscious creator through sacred sound. The universe awaits your voice.